Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we plunge into your sources to find the fascinating insights hiding within. Today, we're tackling really a stack of material all about the cutting edge of skin health. And it's a field just exploding with innovation, isn't it?
It really is.
We're talking about, potentially shedding the need for painful biopsies, creating digital versions of your own skin, peering into your genetic code for answers.
And even exploring that whole microscopic world living right on your surface.
Yeah,
It's fascinating stuff.
yeah,
The skin, I mean, it's your body's largest organ
right.
and most visible.
Yeah.
It's this complex frontier, constantly interacting with the environment, reflecting your internal health.
Right.
And our sources, we've got research papers, news snippets, expert commentary. They all point to, well, a revolution in how we understand, diagnose, and treat things. Everything from common conditions to serious diseases.
It really does feel like we're stepping into a new era for dermatology, tech-driven, science-driven. So, our mission today is to unpack all this, cut through the jargon, and give you a clear picture of how skincare is becoming incredibly precise, deeply personalized, and maybe even predictive.
That's the goal.
Okay, let's unpack this then. So,
Yeah.
let's start where many skin journeys begin. Diagnosis. Our sources are highlighting a huge shift here, particularly for serious stuff like skin cancer. The big idea seems to be moving away from the traditional biopsy.
Yeah, the biopsy, which would be, lengthy, costly,
Invasive,
exactly. The standard approach, it's been visual inspection, maybe using a dermoscope,
right?
and then often cutting out a piece of tissue for the lab, which involves scarring, waiting for results.
So what's the alternative that's emerging?
Well, the sources point to some incredible advances in non-invasive imaging,
Right.
real cutting-edge tech.
Okay.
At Brussels University Hospital, for instance, they're combining two ultra-precision techniques,
Mm-mm.
the confocal microscope and something called LCOCT.
LCOCT.
Yeah, think of these as ways to look inside the skin, deep down, without actually cutting it.
Wow. How does that work, like, in practice?
They use light and advanced optics. You basically place the device on the skin,
Uh-huh.
and it generates these incredibly detailed images, almost like a virtual biopsy in real time. The LCOCT, for example, it can create a 3D reconstruction from 2D images.
So the doctor sees the cell structure right there.
Exactly. They can see if a lesion looks suspicious for cancer right in the
Yeah.
clinic. No waiting for a lab.
And I think you mentioned AI is involved too.
Yes, there's an artificial intelligence tool layered on top. It helps the doctors refine their analysis, flag potential problem areas maybe the human eye might overlook.
Like a second pair of eyes.
Sort of, yeah. An extra layer of immediate analysis.
That speed and precision, it must change more than just the initial diagnosis, right?
Oh, absolutely. The sources make it clear these tools are also vital for treatment planning and follow-up.
How so?
Well, for melanoma or carcinoma, LCOCT can help map out the edges of the cancer much more precisely before surgery.
Ah, so you're more likely to get it all in one go.
That's the aim, to ensure all cancer cells are removed. And then after treatment, you can use it again to check suspect zones non-invasively, see if any disease remains.
So faster, more accurate, and less traumatic for the patient, potentially.
That's the promise, yeah. A really significant shift.
Okay, moving from those serious diagnoses to managing chronic conditions, things like eczema and psoriasis, which affect so many people. The sources highlight breakthroughs here too, driven by understanding the skin's own ecosystem and the immune system.
Yeah, these are incredibly common inflammatory conditions, but the research now is digging much deeper into the causes. And that's leading to fundamentally new ways to treat them.
Let's start with eczema. For many people, managing it just means moisturizers, maybe topical steroids. What's the bigger picture changing now?
A major focus, really huge, is the skin microbiome.
Right, all the bacteria and stuff living on us.
Exactly, that whole bustling community, bacteria, fungi, viruses living on your skin. The research cited in the sources strongly links eczema flare-ups to an imbalance in this community.
An imbalance.
Yeah, often too much of certain bacteria, like Staphylococcus aureus.
The bad ones.
Kinda, yeah.
Yeah.
And not enough of the beneficial ones, like Staphylococcus epidermidis. This imbalance, it's called dysbiosis, and it seems to really drive the inflammation.
So are we actually treating the microbiome now? Is that a thing?
It is. New therapies are emerging, things like creams containing beneficial bacteria, basically probiotics for your skin.
Huh.
Or even prebiotics, which are like food to help the good bacteria already there thrive. The goal is to try and restore that healthy microbial balance.
Okay, that's fascinating. What about prescription options beyond the usual creams?
Oh, there's been an explosion of new targeted drugs. We're seeing biologics. These are injectable drugs that target very specific parts of the immune system pathway linked to eczema. Dupilumab, or Dupixent, is a well-known one.
Right.
Then there are also oral medications called JK inhibitors. Things like ubrdusitinib and abrocitinib. They work inside the cells to block specific immune signals that cause inflammation.
So pills you can take.
Exactly. And newer topical creams, too, that aren't steroids. Crisaborole, ruxolitinib, they offer anti-inflammatory effects without those long-term steroid side effect worries.
Wow. That's a lot more tools in the toolbox for people dealing with eczema.
It really is. And the sources also touch on, the potential role of diet, gut health, even some plant-based therapies, suggesting a more holistic view is gaining traction, too.
Okay, let's switch gears to psoriasis. The sources really emphasize its strong connection to the immune system, calling it a systemic immune disease that manifests on the skin. How's our understanding changed there?
Well, genetic studies have been absolutely key, particularly these large-scale studies called genome-wide association studies, or GWAS.
GWAS, right. Scanning the whole genetic code.
Pretty much, yeah. They scan the entire human genetic code across thousands of people to find tiny variations linked to disease risk. And for psoriasis, they've identified numerous specific genes and biological pathways involved. Things like the IL-12, IL-17 axis, genes like HLA-C.
Okay, that sounds technical, but how does knowing the specific genes actually help?
It tells us which signals in the immune system are basically going haywire to cause that rapid skin cell growth and inflammation you see in psoriasis.
Right.
And knowing that allows for highly targeted therapies. For example, there's a biologic drug called ustekinumab. It works by targeting a protein called P40, which is part of both those IL-12 and IL-23 pathways that the genetic research pinpointed. So by blocking that specific step...
You interrupt the whole inflammatory cascade.
Exactly. And it can dramatically clear up psoriasis for many people.
Yeah.
Understanding these genetic links really opens the door to personalized medicine too, maybe predicting which patients will respond best to which specific drug based on their genetic profile.
And the sources mention, I think, a related condition that's genetically different.
Yes. Generalized pustular psoriasis, or GPP. It's much rarer, but also much more severe, potentially life-threatening.
Okay.
And genetic studies found that GPP is often caused by mutations in one specific gene called IL-36RN. This gene normally makes a protein that acts like a brake on a specific type of inflammation.
And in GPP, the brake is broken.
Essentially, yes. The mutation means the brake is gone, leading to massive, uncontrolled inflammatory cytokine production. Finding this showed that GPP and regular plaque psoriasis are actually genetically distinct diseases, even though they both involve inflamed skin.
Which must be crucial for developing treatments.
Absolutely crucial. It tells researchers exactly what pathway to target for GPP. It all highlights this really complex crosstalk, as the sources call it, between skin cells themselves, like keratinocytes, and the immune cells, all driven by these signaling molecules.
Okay, this next part. It really does feel like something out of a sci-fi movie. Our sources talk about creating digital twins of your skin. What on earth is that?
It sounds futuristic, right? But the concept is pretty straightforward, though complex to execute. A digital twin in this context is basically a dynamic, constantly updating virtual replica of your individual skin.
A virtual copy of my skin.
It's built by integrating just massive amounts of data about you. Think high-resolution images surface, maybe deeper layers your genetic profile, lifestyle factors like diet and stress, environmental exposures, UV radiation, pollution levels where you live, and data from wearable sensors or your electronic health records can feed into it in real time, potentially.
Okay, so it's this living, evolving virtual model of my skin. How is that actually useful for a dermatologist?
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting. The digital twin isn't just a picture. It acts as a simulation model.
A simulation.
Yeah. So for conditions like acne or psoriasis, imagine instead of trying different creams or pills on your actual skin and waiting weeks or months.
The trial and error approach.
Exactly, which can be so frustrating. The digital twin could potentially simulate how your unique skin might respond to various medications or light therapies or even lifestyle changes.
So it could predict the best treatment for me before I even start.
That's the ultimate goal, to minimize that trial and error and move towards true precision medicine. It could also be huge for aesthetic and anti-aging treatments.
How so?
Well, the twin, knowing your genetics, your sun exposure history, could maybe predict your skin's aging trajectory, and then simulate the effects of procedures like lasers or fillers, tailoring the settings specifically to your skin's structure to get the best results, and, importantly, minimize risks like scarring or unnatural outcomes.
And you mentioned it being predictive earlier about future problems.
Yes, that's the really proactive side. By analyzing all that integrated data over time, the digital twin might be able to forecast your risk of developing future issues, predict your likelihood of melanoma down the line, perhaps, or predict when a rosacea flare-up might occur based on environmental triggers.
Which would let doctors intervene much earlier.
Exactly. Recommend preventative strategies, start treatments sooner when they're less invasive and more effective. It shifts the focus from reactive treatment to proactive health management.
Okay, are these virtual skins actually being used right now? Is this happening?
It's still in the early stages in dermatology, definitely. But the concept is being piloted, drawing on successes in other fields like oncology or cardiology, where digital twins are a bit further along.
I see.
Companies are definitely working on it. Sources mention names like Skin Twin and others leveraging these principles, integrating digital twin concepts with AI for things like melanoma research or tracking how lesions change over time. So it's emerging.
It sounds incredibly powerful, but I mean, integrating all that personal data, the technology, there must be significant challenges, right?
Oh, absolutely huge challenges.
Mm.
Data privacy and security are paramount. You're collecting incredibly sensitive personal health information, often continuously. That needs robust protection and ethical guidelines.
Makes sense.
Then there's the sheer infrastructure required.
Right.
The hardware, the software, the AI algorithms, training healthcare professionals to use it effectively. Integrating that into clinics everywhere, especially in resource-limited settings, is a massive hurdle. And you also have big questions around regulatory approval. Proving these twins are accurate and actually improve outcomes. Clinical validation is essential. And liability. What happens if the simulation is wrong? Who's responsible? These are all critical things that need to be worked out.
Okay, let's switch scale now. Let's shrink right down and talk about nanotechnology. Our sources explore how these incredibly tiny particles are making a pretty big difference in, well, everything from medicine to makeup.
Yeah, nanotechnology is all about working with materials at the nanoscale less than 100 nanometers, which is, incredibly small, smaller than a virus.
Wow.
And at that tiny size, substances can have really unique physical and chemical properties compared to their larger versions. Nanodermatology is just applying this tiny tech to skin health and cosmetics.
How do these tiny particles even interact with our skin? Isn't it supposed to be a barrier?
It is a great barrier, absolutely. But nanoparticles are so small they can potentially use different pathways to get in or through, maybe through hair follicles or squeezing between skin cells and lipids, especially if the skin barrier isn't perfectly intact like an eczema.
Okay.
And this tiny size is really key for improving drug delivery. It can help active ingredients penetrate the skin better, maybe stay stable longer, or even be released more slowly and specifically where needed. Sometimes it means you don't need as many harsh chemical enhancers to get the drug through.
So where are we actually seeing this being used already?
It's actually already quite widespread, maybe more than people realize.
Yep.
In some antiseptics, for example, using nanosilver for longer-lasting antimicrobial effects.
Uh-huh.
And it's really common in sunscreens. Those at zinc oxide and titanium dioxide nanoparticles. They provide excellent broad-spectrum UV protection, but without leaving that thick, pasty white residue you used to get.
Right, so that's nano.
Often, yeah.
Yeah.
The nano size helps them spread evenly and stay in the very top layer of the skin to do their job.
What about for treating specific skin conditions?
The sources mention several applications. For acne, nanoparticles can help improve the effectiveness of ingredients like adapalene, or maybe reduce the irritation you can get from things like retinoids or benzoyl peroxide by delivering them differently.
Okay.
For inflammatory conditions like eczema or psoriasis, researchers are looking at packaging drugs like steroids or tacrolimus inside tiny lipid nanoparticles. The idea is potentially enhancing penetration into the inflamed skin while maybe reducing systemic absorption and side effects.
Interesting.
Nanoparticles are even being explored for delivering more potent drugs, like cytotoxic agents for severe psoriasis, potentially more effectively and with less toxicity, or for delivering psorolens used in light therapy.
And you mentioned cosmetics and anti-aging products, too.
Oh yeah, they're used in all sorts of things, sometimes just for texture or how pigments disperse in makeup, like lipsticks or foundations.
Right.
But more functionally, the sources mention things like chitin nanofibrils derived from natural sources, like crustacean shells, showing promise in studies for reducing wrinkles or promoting wound healing. And ingredients like retinoids are often formulated in nanosomes or other nanoparticles for anti-aging or skin lightening products, aiming for better stability and delivery with less irritation. There's even research into using nanoparticles for damaged hair cuticles or nail infections.
So it sounds like there are tons of exciting applications, but working at such a tiny scale, are there any downsides, any risks we should know about?
That's a really important question, and the sources definitely highlight that safety is a major consideration. Because these particles are so small, there are concerns about increased exposure not just through the skin, but potentially inhalation or ingestion if they become airborne or are in oral products.
Hmm.
And penetration through the skin can be enhanced, especially if the barrier is already damaged. Toxicity is complex. It can depend a lot on the particle size, what it's made of, its shape, its surface coating.
So not all nanoparticles are the same.
Not at all. There are questions being studied about whether they can accumulate in the skin or potentially travel to other organs. Potential for DNA damage is another area, particularly with some metal oxides like titanium dioxide when combined with UV light, although the extent of this risk in typical sunscreen use is still debated. Triggering inflammatory responses is also possible, and even broader environmental concerns.
So it's powerful tech, but we need to be careful.
Exactly. It's an active area of research and regulation to ensure these powerful tools are used safely and responsibly as their applications continue to expand.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground on diagnosis, treatment tech, virtual models. Let's circle back now to something really fundamental. The blueprint of who you are, your genetics. How has understanding our genetic code really revolutionized how we approach skin diseases?
It's been transformative, truly. The last decade especially has seen incredible breakthroughs thanks to these powerful genetic technologies like next-generation sequencing, NGS, and whole exome sequencing, WES.
Right, the ability to read DNA much faster and cheaper.
Exactly. These tools have just completely changed our ability to pinpoint the exact genetic mutations, the root causes underlying many inherited skin disorders, what we call genodermatosis.
What made it so hard before these technologies came along?
Well, older methods were often slow, laborious, and needed quite a lot of DNA. That was really difficult for rare conditions, which often affect only small families, so you just didn't have enough genetic material or related individuals to easily map the gene.
Made sense.
Newer technologies are much faster, need way less DNA, and can scan vast amounts of the genetic code simultaneously. This makes finding that single misspelled gene, even in a small family or a single affected individual, much more feasible. And the skin is actually a great system for studying these links because it's accessible. You can get samples relatively easily, study the cells.
Right. Can you give us maybe a couple of concrete examples from the sources, how finding a specific gene actually changed things?
Yeah, absolutely. Take harlequinichthyosis. It's a very, very severe inherited skin disorder present at birth. Genetic sequencing identified mutations in a gene called ABCA12.
Okay.
Now, this ABCA12 gene is critical for transporting lipids, fats, which are essential building blocks for the skin's barrier function. Finding this link showed precisely why the skin barrier is so profoundly defective in this condition.
And knowing the gene helped how?
Well, crucially, it allowed prenatal diagnosis to shift from highly invasive fetal skin biopsies, which carried risks, to much safer genetic testing using amniotic fluid or chorionic villus sampling. A huge step forward.
Wow. Okay. Another example.
Exfoliative ichthyosis, another inherited condition where the skin peels. Combining different genetic analysis techniques pinpointed mutations in the CSTA gene.
CSTA.
Yeah, this gene codes for a protein, cystatin A, that acts like an inhibitor for certain enzymes that break down proteins. Research showed this protein is key for helping skin cells stick together properly in the lower layers of the epidermis.
So losing it causes the skin splitting.
Exactly. Finding the mutation revealed the specific molecular mechanism, the loss of this cellular glue, causing the skin to peel and split.
And there is one more mention, Olmsted syndrome.
Yes, a very rare and severe condition causing painful thickening of the skin on palms and soles, among other issues. Whole exome sequencing, looking at all the protein coding genes, actually helped discover that this syndrome could be caused by mutations in two different genes in different families, TRPV3 and MBTPS2.
Two different genes for the same looking condition.
Apparently, yes. TRPV3 is an ion channel involved in things like sensing heat and calcium signaling in skin cells. The mutations found were gain of function, meaning the channel becomes overactive, potentially leading to cell stress and death, causing the skin thickening, the keratoderma.
Okay. And the other gene?
MBTPS2 is involved in how cells respond to stress, particularly in the endoplasmic reticulum. Mutations here affect enzyme activity, and the severity seems linked to how much activity is lost. So it highlights how different genetic paths, different broken molecular machines, can ultimately lead to similar clinical outcomes.
And understanding the specific gene helps understand the mechanism.
Precisely. But it's not just about these rare diseases, as we talked about with eczema and psoriasis.
Right, the GWS studies.
Exactly. Those technologies have illuminated the complex genetic landscape of common conditions, too, identifying numerous genetic variants, each with a small effect, that collectively increase your risk. Finding genes like FLG, filigrin, which is crucial for building a strong skin barrier protein, completely changed our understanding of why some people are prone to eczema, and even linked it directly to other allergic conditions like asthma. It showed a fundamental barrier defect was key.
So understanding the genes really tells us the why behind the disease, doesn't it?
It really does. It provides those crucial mechanistic insights into how a disease develops at the most fundamental level. And often, these findings have relevance beyond just the skin. They show shared genetic pathways or mechanisms with conditions affecting other organs, like inflammatory bowel disease. It really reinforced the idea that skin health is deeply interconnected with your overall systemic health.
We touched on non-invasive imaging back when we talked about cancer diagnosis, but the sources highlight other pretty incredible technological tools that are giving us new ways to visualize and assess skin health more broadly.
Yes, absolutely. Beyond just looking at the surface with our eyes or a simple magnifier, these advanced imaging techniques are providing, microscopic views or measuring properties beneath the surface, giving us objective data we just never had before.
What are some examples of these tools being used?
Well, one mentioned is high-frequency ultrasound.
Ultrasound, like for pregnancy.
Similar principle, but using much higher frequencies to get detailed images of the shallow layers of the skin. Dermatologists are using it to measure things like skin thickness, density, maybe even elasticity.
And what's that useful for?
It's being used quite a bit to objectively track skin aging over time. So instead of just subjectively saying skin looks better, you can measure changes in thickness or density. This helps guide personalized anti-aging treatments and, importantly, measure how well products or procedures are actually working. Provides real data.
Okay, objective tracking. What about for conditions like, say, precancers?
Yeah. Reflectance confocal microscopy, or RCM, which we've mentioned briefly before with cancer, is proving really valuable for lesions like actinic keratosis. These are those rough patches caused by sun damage that can sometimes turn into squamous cell carcinoma.
Right.
RCM allows dermatologists to get a non-invasive microscopic look at the cells within that lesion, right there in the clinic, without needing to cut it out for a biopsy. They can see the cellular architecture.
A virtual microscope view.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
And studies mentioned in the sources are even developing visual scales based on these RCM images to help doctors grade the severity of the actinic keratosis,
Yeah.
identify concerning changes, and monitor non-invasively whether treatments like creams or light therapy are effectively clearing those precancerous cells.
That's great. And there was even tech looking at the whole body surface.
Right, total body photography combined with AI. This is particularly useful for patients at high risk for melanoma, maybe people with lots of moles or a family history.
How does that work?
Instead of a dermatologist just examining individual spots during a checkup, high-resolution photos are taken of the entire skin surface periodically. Then, AI algorithms compare the images over time.
Looking for changes.
Exactly. The AI can automatically flag any new lesions that have appeared or any existing moles that have changed in size, shape, or color, potentially much earlier or more systematically than relying on human memory or patient reporting alone. It helps clinicians track the entire skin landscape.
It really sounds like technology is just giving us this whole new layer of detail and objectivity, doesn't it, for understanding skin health?
It really is. These tools and others mentioned in the sources, things like Raman spectroscopy, which analyzes skin composition chemically, or OCT, which gives optical cross-sections like a mini MRI for skin, they're all complementing the molecular and genetic insights we've talked about, moving diagnosis, monitoring, and treatment evaluation towards being much more precise, objective, and hopefully more proactive.
Wow. Okay, what a deep dive that was. We've covered so much ground on the revolution happening in skin health. We've seen how non-invasive imaging is potentially replacing the need for biopsies, offering faster, more precise cancer diagnosis.
Right, and we explored how cracking the code of the skin microbiome and our own genetics is leading to these incredibly targeted therapies for common, often debilitating conditions like eczema and psoriasis. Real personalized medicine starting to happen.
Yeah, and we peered into that, well, that almost sci-fi future with the potential of digital twins creating a virtual copy of your skin for highly personalized treatment simulations and even predictive health forecasting.
And then shrinking down to the nanoscale, looking at the dual promise and the necessary caution around nanotechnology for enhancing drug delivery and improving cosmetics.
And we wrapped it all up by looking at these advanced imaging tools that are letting us see beneath the surface, track changes, and assess skin health with just unprecedented detail and objectivity.
It's really clear, isn't it? Skin health is right at the intersection of so many exciting technological and scientific advancements.
Absolutely.
I mean, from decoding your unique genetic makeup and understanding the microbial ecosystem living on you to potentially creating a dynamic digital mirror of your largest organ. The future of dermatology looks incredibly personalized and data-driven.
It really does. And it makes you wonder, as all these technologies, AI, genetics, imaging, continue to advance and, importantly, converge, especially maybe feeding into something like a digital twin, how will our fundamental understanding of what even constitutes normal or healthy skin change?
That's a big question.
Will we move entirely away from just reacting to problems after they appear and shift purely into predicting and preventing them based on these hyper-personalized insights? And maybe the biggest question, who gets access?
Yeah.
Who will actually benefit from this incredible level of tailored predictive skincare?
Yeah, access and equity are going to be huge issues to grapple with.
Definitely something to think about.